Welcome back to Criminological Theory. We're going to take a look at early social structure and string theories of crime now, taking a look at the impact of society on possible criminality. When we always start off the chapter, I give you a base level outlay of what we're going to do as we continue on. And what you can see here is in the previous chapters where we talked about possible biology coming into play, we are now taking into account the way society is structured. And we're going to get into some of these particular structures that you see here that are on the introductory slide. The first early theories looked at society when it was structured in the Industrial Revolution, and particularly looked at this idea of what was occurring in cities. Now, Comite predated, in some measure, many of these rise of the cities or the Industrial Revolution, but it's where we now in crim borrow from our friends in the sociology field. Again, you will notice in criminology that you're going to see many different aspects of all kinds of different ideas of science and business and understandings of the way the world works that are coming into play with trying to understand why does crime occur the way that it does. And one of this was looking at obviously the dynamics of society in terms of how do people relate to each other. And we know that people relate to each other in a lot of different ways, and some of them are through the institutions that they establish, others are through obviously their family structures, and some are through just the development of culture, for example. So it's this idea of from each of those ways that we connect with each other, that there could be some interplay with possible criminality. We can also see here another theorist spoke on the fact that there was this idea of what we call relative deprivation. And you can see the definition there. So now we're getting into, there is again involvement of business and economics, but now we're talking about this idea that basically when individuals, it's argued in the early theories, were poor or are poor, they're more likely to drift towards crime as a means to basically survive. Right? It's this idea of if human beings need food, they're going to steal food in order to get it. They're not. The argument was they're not likely to go, to example, to a food bank or to ask other people for food. They're going to steal in order to get it. There's this idea that individuals who need money to pay for their housing are going to steal the money in order to pay for their housing. So the interplay really here was on, in many instances, the have and have-nots, which come about later on in another discussion of theory that looks at crime on the issue of money. But where most of you have probably heard of something related to society is this idea of Emile Durkheim's exploration of social structure. And Emile Durkheim gave us through this idea of anime, right? This idea of a state of normalness. And what he was arguing was by looking at things like society, individuals who actually are considered the so-called normal, or individuals who might be outside of the normal, where they're individuals who actually have more money, so the upper class, they're not committing suicide just because of psychiatric issues. As a matter of fact, Emile Durkheim doesn't equate suicide, for example, to anything related to psychiatric issues. He said it's all about money and it's about connection. And when society is disrupted, especially as, believe it or not, it's reaching rapid economic growth, there might actually be issues where individuals in the middle and upper class will become disaffected and disconnected from society, maybe because they need to continue to work or work harder in order to maintain their status, or they are particularly looking at the connection of individuals amongst them who don't have enough, and they become disaffected by how society is structured and feel like there's no point in continuing on. But he said outside of society, as he applied it to that in relation, outside of suicide, he applied it to the rest of society. What he basically argued was rapid change is not actually good. That rapid economic growth, even though for a negative, um, is not actually a good thing, right? You don't want, in essence, too much wealth, which sounds odd to us when we think about it, but this was Durkheim's state of normalness. Moving on from these early theories, what started to develop in the social structure is this idea of strain, right? So we're going to look at Merton, Cohen, Cloward, and Olin, but basically it was looking at this idea of frustration. What makes people frustrated and then more likely to engage in criminal behavior or activity in response to that frustration? So Merton in 1938, who, as you see here, is considered highly influential, looked at it on the idea of the American dream. We have always been told certain things as Americans, and particularly it's centered around our work ethic. And if we work hard, will we be able to achieve our goals? Well, look at the time period that he was breaking down, the 1930s. There was a Great Depression going on in the United States. From that Great Depression, people were working just as hard and paying their dues, if not harder, and they weren't achieving their goals. And Merton really looked at that and went, is the American dream achievable for everyone? Well, his first critique for strain is on that requirement that you achieve success or wealth. And as you see here, when he mentions playing by the rules, the problem there is we don't often encourage even the members in the middle or upper class to play by the rules in order to get their money. This should sound familiar for those of you who study white collar crime, for example, where we talk a lot about businesses and wealthy people not being afraid to stiff their consumers by overpricing or doing things like shrinkflation, where they're giving you less but charging you more, or for individuals who are wealthy, where they're willing to stiff their shareholders and steal from pensions or create Ponzi schemes. In the example of Bernie Madoff, the wealthy are going to continue to obtain their wealth, and we're going to tell other people that they need to work hard to achieve it, but do you necessarily need to play by the rules to attain it? And Merton actually argued, no, we don't encourage that. If the rules are uniform and the same for everyone, you would, in essence, be able to achieve your goals by working hard. He said the other one, too, was what is considered our universal success versus your access to it. Does everybody have the same access opportunities? We're discussing this now, even in the year 2024. If you go to school, for example, in a higher education level, do you have access to higher education? Well, it's argued in 2024 it's easier now to get access to higher education than it ever was. But does that necessarily mean that equal access leads to legitimate means to achieving your goals? Some individuals have stated that when they go out on the job market, they're often told they have to go back and get advanced learning degrees that they didn't anticipate they would have had to get because employers want higher learning or even years of experience that they don't have before raising people up to the level where they're going to be able to buy a home, start a family, make ends meet, basically. And then also, too, for those that we see in the United States, we are entering into a time period in which there is a greater divide between the individuals who have money and the individuals who are struggling. So as whether it's inflation or political division or just how far does what you're getting paid go in terms of overall income level and status, we are seeing as these divides continue, individuals will often turn to differential access to illegitimate means rather than the differential access to legitimate means, which is breaking down to does everyone have equal access to achieving their goals? So basically, he broke it down like this. You can see here that the American dream is structured in this fashion that's stated on the slide. And the final two bullet points are the ones where he said why crime occurs. If you are not able to become wealthy in the United States, either because those are the rungs above you, don't let you rise up, or it becomes too hard for you through legitimate means to get to the next rung above where you are, you will become disillusioned with the American dream, frustrated, and not only will you suffer serious strain and the rest of society suffers strain through your response by turning to crime or even greater political division, for example. But on top of that, you will view crime as the only legitimate means, even though is illegitimate, to obtain your goals, which is obtaining that economic status. So it's ironic that he looked at this in 1938, coming out of a pandemic, coming out of a depression, because the pandemic was in the 1919. And then now we had a pandemic in 2020, and then now we're in a heightened state of not only just economic change and questionable influx or status levels, to we're still having this debate in 2024. Merton also looked at the fact of the critique of society, saying, stop putting so much emphasis on material success, right? So this is really important to someone in the level of higher education. Higher education was not started as simply something where you can go and get a degree in order to get a better job. That's what you see, for example, on the community college level, they'll have workforce development programs. Higher education, the four-year level institution, was to gain knowledge. It was to learn things and to experience things outside of your current social situation and status. So it was introduction to new ways of thought and also to new people so you can grow as a human being. Also, too, what we have found is that individuals are classified in the lower class do not get the opportunity to achieve their truth, as we talked about before. So Merton would state, when you're looking at an individual who robbed a bank, right? There's a reason why a person would rob a bank. If they can't get the money that they need, they're going to find an illegitimate means of access to that money. Cohen looked at it, particularly, again, we're still dealing with class status issues, but how does the low class match up with the middle class? Now, it's interesting, too, because there can be an argument made, and it's made in business and economics, that there is no middle class anymore, in essence. That basically we are either the lower upper, and then basically an upper lower, upper middle, and then upper, to the point that there is also what we would call like a super lower class, basically, and that the middle class has basically been gone. There's too much division in terms of the growth of income and overall wealth in society. So Cohen looked at that and said, low class people will actually do something by creating an oppositional subculture, that they will respond to not being able to meet middle class standards by creating their own culture. And what you find is amongst the children, particularly, either the boys will start to become delinquent. You'll see kids out on the corner selling drugs or seeing them engaged in risky behaviors. So that's the corner boy. Or you will see some lower class people will send their kids to college as a means to finally meet the middle class standard. Cloward and Olin, looked at it as a matter of what we call differential opportunity. Now, they looked at it by gangs, and they said that each of these gangs were based on something related to strain, so still building off of Merton. And basically what they were arguing through differential opportunity is that people will seek out like-minded individuals, especially in this subculture, in order to achieve their means of success, even if it's illegitimate. So as you see here, the structures are the criminal, conflict, or retreatist. And in each of them, a person is joining that gang for different reasons. The criminal gangs will often provide people access to things like money, whether it's through selling drugs or running weapons, that they couldn't achieve in any other way. The conflict gangs will be engaged in literally fighting over what's left of neighborhoods, fighting over the scraps, fighting over other people, and providing protection to kids who otherwise can't get protection. And then the retreatist gangs are individuals that basically have just left society completely. They don't see any point in being involved in societal structure, so they're going to lash out by engaging in oppositional behavior. So eventually what this all builds into is what we call general strain theory. This idea that you as a person will experience every day, and how that stress builds in a person, that's the greater likelihood that you will engage in criminal behavior. Robert Agnew is one of our general strain theorists. He actually listed 3 categories of strain. And in each of them, what he found was that the problem becomes a failure to achieve goals. So whether it's anger, whether it's issues related to monetary problems or any other stressors, you are trying to respond to the strain that is occurring around you, and you are trying to achieve your goals. To the point that he discussed, on some measure, the difference of stimuli. So each of these stimuli have some connection to some part of, on some measure, the aspects of strain. So what we're seeing here is that it often can be considered what we call a difference between objective and subjective. Whether a person actually has the events or conditions in which their group is being impacted, or subjective, where they believe that there's a issue, or even how they're perceived by other people who experience them. So what it's really broken down to is, with these 3 categories, it's failure to achieve positively valued goals, removal of positive stimuli, and introduction of negative stimuli. Right? You are, in some measure, not being able to achieve the things that you want to be able to achieve, and then you're going to have the most strain because the positive stimuli is no longer there. To wrap it up, like we do in every chapter, the policy implications recommend that we intervene with high-risk children, that we try to help these kids turn away from risky behavior by engaging in healthy behavior, that we encourage society to turn away from material success, and we equalize opportunity and re-emphasize playing by the rules. I hope that this was helpful in your pursuit of your studies and understanding what was discussed this week, and I thank you for your time.